So I'm gonna open the floor up to y'all and let y'all hear what y'all have to say, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it. So anyone have any guesses? Okay, go ahead.
Isn't CAD more like where you're the 2D type, I guess, layout, the blueprint, and then modeling where you're, I guess, the 3D maybe put it together?
Yeah, sort of on the right track. Yeah.
Is CAD is how you do it, and modeling is what you're doing?
Well, not exactly. It's I'll explain a little more. Let's hear some more ideas.
I would say that CAD is, if I'm not mistaken, computer-aided design. Modeling technically is the same thing, but usually CAD, at least on the consumer or professional view, is thought of more as software that does blueprints, that does buildings, that does, I don't know, machinery, things of that sort. And modeling feels more like you're doing more detailed work, more let's say textures, things of that sort, versus making a bolt or making a piece of a car or something.
Yeah, we're getting on the right track. Does anyone else have any more ideas?
Final thought. Would modeling be specific only to arts and entertainment industry, gaming kind of stuff, whereas CAD can be applied in any industry, including arts and gaming?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you'll see that a lot. So let's talk a little bit more about it. So CAD versus modeling. So CAD is called computer aided design. It's more, you'll see it a lot used for 3D printing. So like you were saying, is that it was a 2D figure. You start with a 2D figure and then you extrude from there. While modeling, you usually start with a 3D object already, and from there you extrude and you manipulate the 3D object to do what you want it to do. Another really great way to determine, to tell the difference between CAD versus modeling is you'll see CAD used a lot for real world objects. You'll see it happen in real world. That's why it's used for 3D printing, versus modeling, which you can, like, for example, an engine is being created. In CAD, you have to create every single part. You have to create the inside, the outside, so that you can see how it works. Modeling, you can get away with just designing the outside of it, because you're not gonna, unless you really want to see the inside, and you're gonna take it apart. But most of the time, you can just design the shell of it, and it will still serve its purpose. So that's just a little bit about CAD versus modeling. So what industries use modeling? So obviously the gaming industry, entertainment, architecture, marketing. And I want to start another conversation about what other industries do you think could be using modeling that aren't already using modeling? So that's a little bit of a tough question to think about. So
IKEA. I read an article that for those of us that are IKEA fans, you get the catalog, and it's these really nice places that you see in Europe and how they maximize these small rooms and everything looks cool. Turns out that like 80-90% of it, it's just modeling. It's done through modeling software. So I lived a lie.
I also think it has great uses for teaching. being able to print something out and show the kids has much more of an impact than them just talking about. Let's just say a human heart there's just way more impact when they hold a model of a human heart rather than just talking about it, looking at pictures.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great, there's been some studies done with teaching and modeling.
I think that one thing that you guys as teachers of future generations might have to work with or face in a certain way is that the way that industries are right now are changing constantly. And so the way in which you guys went to school and in many ways that we have been to school or some students are still going through school is not, and talked about that through pedagogy, right? And throughout years, and how sometimes certain degrees and certain classes that you take change once you hit the industry. And in that regard, I would say for those of you that know a little bit about Internet of Things and how equipment and machinery connect, there's a really interesting tie-in in which you see Internet of Things and manufacturing and service industry that are working together. And for instance, if you were to do something on vocational programs through gaming, through modeling, a lot of the things that some industries are trying to work with is, for instance, let's say that you have one of those giant caterpillar machineries that till the roll. Um, some of the technology that they're trying to do is, let's say that a certain piece breaks down, and so Caterpillar might have a database of those specific parts, and so a mechanic or a service provider would go and look at the part. They would put on some 3D glasses, and through those glasses you would see the diagram of the part and different parts and how you can separate that in different sections that you can take off from that section, so you can put the new parts and then put it back together. And so a lot of those things, I know that, for instance, with parents, that they might think that gaming is, why would you be doing video games? But a lot of these things is going back to pedagogy and the way in which you use this technology is, this could be the means to a different end. So obviously you can build video games, right? Because you can model a character. But in the process of modeling something, you can make a character for a game, you can make a building, you can make a machine, you can make a car, you can make all these things. And then through different types of technology, you can integrate those through different ways and different means that a specific company might use for a specific service that maybe it's not there right now, but it's probably going to be there in the future.
Right on. That's yeah. So as you can see, there's a lot of use for modeling wherever you go, and so there's a lot of creative ways to use modeling in real world examples. And one of the ways that it's being used right now is in the medical field. They're using it for anatomy. And so instead of people having to go and look at medical students looking at cadavers and having to study cadavers, they can study using HoloLenses, and they can be able to interact and work. And it's actually, there's a study that was done that actually shows that they scored about the same, except that there was proven that there was that people who worked on the cadaver spent twice as long studying versus people who use the HoloLens. So there's just a lot of ways that modeling can be used, and it's really cool. So what softwares are available to use in modeling? One of the big ones is Maya. Maya is done through Autodesk. It's you have to pay for it, obviously, and then there's Blender, which is free. They're very different, but they're also the same. The functions and the mechanics of Blender and Maya are very different, but the fundamentals of pulling and extruding 3D objects is how it starts. And then a really great program that it has CAD in it, and the CAD is different from modeling, but you can still model, is Autodesk Tinkercad, and it's free, and you can use it for any of your students. And it's a really great tool to start. You use 3D objects, and you can basically put them together, create holes, shapes, and all of that. So there is a lot of great ways to do it. Another thing that's different about Maya between Maya and Blender is Maya is you can animate in Maya, so you can actually like make the model move and change direction, make people, all that good stuff. So we are going to talk a little bit about concept art. Concept art is super important to modeling. Concept art basically is how the pre-design to modeling. It's like taking an idea and putting it on paper and creating different shapes and sizes before you go ahead and create a model. It allows you to think through the process. So a great example is on the right here is you have Rapunzel from Tangled, and you have your different character features. You can see that they're really thinking the process through about how they're designing and how they're creating. And they're on the left, there's some items that you probably don't see pictures of before, but you have to create them and design them and come up with them in your imagination and put them on paper so that you can have a great idea of where you want to start and how that design wants to be before you get started. So with that, we're going to start our first activity, which you're going to look up online a concept art from your favorite video game or your favorite movie, and then we're going to talk a little bit about it. And you're going to go ahead and post it on a Jamboard. So I'm going to go ahead and share that link with y'all. And there's the chat. So there's a link to the Jamboard, and go ahead and you have, let's say, oops, what time is it? Let's say about 10 minutes.
Just while people look up their concept art, I put it in the chat. I'm just gonna say it again. Maya is actually like it costs money for industry, but for educators and education, it's actually free. So Autodesk is really good with education, and so it's one of those things of like learn it while it's free for students is what I always tell people, because once you're out of education, then it's decently expensive to learn. So yeah, so Autodesk Maya is free with an educational license, which you just have to apply for.
It's funny. Yesterday I saw a meme about concept arts. I'm trying to find it because it was very funny. But let me try to find it. But it was super funny. I don't know why I didn't save it. And then I will share it in the chat.
Yeah, and we had mentioned it a little bit during yesterday's session. We didn't go that much into depth, but concept art like Caroline was showing in her slides with like the faces, like that's really important because a lot of the times the people who are modeling don't know, you know, they can't imagine everything that they're supposed to be making. And I don't know if you guys remember again our talk from yesterday. A big thing is like making sure that, you know, the game is artistically the same, right? And you know, if you don't have concept art to help do that, then you might get a variety of different styles because, you know, as and I always see modelers as artists, you know, as artists, you know, you tend to put your own little twist on things. So concept art is a way to, you know, keep your game consistent. Um, Plus it puts less strain on the modeler and animator because, you know, you don't need to imagine this amazing thing anymore. You know, it's been done for you. Um, so concept art is very important. And most, like Caroline was saying, like with this activity, most animated movies and games have concept art you can either unlock in the game or they'll release in like documentary. And it's crazy to see if there's any, you know, Mandalorian fans of the show, like you at the end of each episode they would show kind of the concept art, right? So it's for me personally the coolest thing about concept art is how it goes from paper of like this is what I'm thinking, like this is how I'm thinking it should look, to like, you know, it existing in some 3D space. I don't know. With concept art, I'm not artistically talented when it comes to drawing, as some of the people in the studio have seen, especially okay, you don't have to agree that hard, Caroline. Um, you don't gotta do me like that. But you know, I do work with animation as well, and you know, having people who are artistically talented kind of show the idea that they have or like the look that you're trying to get really it's a challenge. It's something that even when you learn animation in school, you know, it's a part of it. It's easy sometimes to just imagine it and make it, and it's something else to get shown something that you have to make. And you know that's just part of growing as a animator, as a, you know, modeler.
um a way that I look at concept art is like being an engineer. I have an engineering mindset and I see everything in isometric views. Like I'm like, okay, I want to see it in one way. I want to see it from the left side. I want to see it from the right side. And this really allows me to get a grasp of what it's supposed to look like before I sit there and, like George is saying, it keeps everything in check and like allows that before it becomes in real life. It takes it like it's a really good way to look at it and just saying like, okay, here's a base, here's one side, and here's how I wanted to see in isometric view. So I like, that's how I connect it a lot to engineering.
And that's one of the things where like anytime I've talked to people, you know, at the university, you know, high schoolers that like want to do art, like digital art, like they love digital art, concept arts, you know, a booming industry, right? A lot of different, the gaming industry, like she said, in animation. But like I said, like the Mandalorian is a, you know, is a show. So like sometimes they need concept art for movies and different things. So definitely I always encourage that for people who want to be digital artists, that concept art is definitely, being a concept artist is always an option.
A lot of great pictures already here. And I'm going to pick a few, and I just want you to basically talk about why you chose that and why it's your favorite, or why you chose it, or why you like it, because something unique about it. So I'm going to pick some random ones and share my screen in just a bit. Unless everyone has uploaded a picture.
I'm liking the variation. They went from some some Nintendo peaceful characters to GTA. So that's cool.
I'm not gonna spoil where the video game is from or where it's from, so you're gonna have to announce that whenever whoever piece I pick. Tell us where it's from as well. Alrighty, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen again. So I really like, can I zoom in? Yes, I really like this one. So whoever posted this one, please tell us where it's from.
Okay, this is Bastion's Keep from Diablo 3. And the reason I picked this one is because it's one of my favorite chapters of the game itself. And I just love that level, love that design, love that it's like a castle. And I love the whole setting. Like, I know it doesn't show it here in the concept art, but if you guys watch Lord of the Rings, this entire level is basically Helm's Deep all over again. And it's just great. I just love this level. I love the level design, and it's basically one of my favorite games of all time. So
I really like how you chose an environment and not just like a character or like an item, because like I think that's really cool. And I know y'all talked about environments and how that can play a part in designing. Let's go ahead and go with this one.
I picked the Mario Kart because it's actually one of the games I like to play. I even have it on my phone, so it's a design from the kart, like one of the vehicles they use.
I'm trying to. Which Mario Kart is that one from? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I think it was 8, Mario Kart 8.
Oh, okay. They all started blending together at one point. And last but not least, because I kind of have an obsession with this, so go ahead.
Alrighty, so this is a concept art of Attack on Titan, the anime, and I think the process, right? It's a lot, and just how George was mentioning yesterday, the storyline has to do a lot with keeping you wanting to come back and seeing it. But yeah, this is Attack on Titan.
Love Attack on Titan. So that's really great choices, guys. I really like it all. So I'm gonna go ahead and move back to. So one of the last things we're gonna talk about is normal mapping. So what normal mapping is it's like making bumps and ridges and like basically like faking lighting using bumps and dents. So like we all know that lighting plays an important portion on how we see things and how our depth is. And like the animation on your right shows that how we look and how we see the light determines how we look at everything. And in an animation, you can manipulate that light. We'll create fake light by creating bumps and dents. And George, I think you can explain it a little bit better than I can. And so
Yeah.
you want to.
Yeah, so in video games, you're dealing with a lot of processing, right? And so you want to cut down the amount of faces and edges you have on a character, right? Because the more complicated the model is, the more, the computer needs to try to calculate the light and how the light bounces off. So, and this might ruin video games for you. The way that a lot of games do it is they give a normal map, or a bump map is also one that's used. Normal maps are more common in games. And all it is what Caroline said. It's giving, you're basically baking shadows to give the illusion of depth. So if you look at a wall around you at your house, you'll see that like a lot of times they'll have bumps. They'll have, it's not just, not always, but they're like, it's, you'll see that. Well, in video games, you're not actually going in and modeling all those bumps. What's happening is you're seeing the bump itself, and it's giving shadows to it. So that way you feel like there's bumps. They tend to do this a lot with like the ground. So next time you play a video game, if you literally just walk up to something that has like texture like that, if you get really close to it, you'll see that it's actually completely flat. There's no texture at all. But like when you're far away, it gives you that illusion. That's a normal map.
So lighting is pretty cool, and it plays a huge effect on how things are, and like the way you animate things and the way you model things definitely change how our people perceive them. So the very last thing I'm going to share is we're gonna talk. Oop, why is my screen black? My screen just went black. I'm sorry. Okay, there we go. I figured it out. I'm gonna show y'all some amazing things that you can do. It's just gonna be a quick like little preview. If you really want to see it, I'm gonna share the links with George, and he can post them later with the assignment so that you can check it out. But I'm gonna go ahead and start this one. This is done in Tinkercad. It is a they're making a lightsaber. So he had a design, a concept art already previously created, and he's going to use shapes and designs to do it. And as you notice, he has to think ahead a little bit. You have to think a few steps ahead about where you want to design, how you want it to look, and how you want it to see. So I'm going to speed this up just a little bit. But it's thinking ahead, and it's a lot of also looking at your concept art and everything. So this is taking something that's been designed and been previously made and turning it into real life. And this is a real cool part. So this is Tinkercad. Last I'm going to show is Maya. And you'll get to see, this is really cool. So he starts out with a square, and he's extruding it, and he's designing it and changing the shapes and manipulating the structure to create, well, if you read, a pirate ship. So this is how it's looking. It's how it's starting, and I want to show you what it looks like in the end. So basically, from a square, he's made a pirate ship from 120 square, and that's pretty amazing. And that's what you can do with animation and modeling. And so that's all I have for my segment. I'm gonna go ahead and pass it off to Randy.
Before that, I just wanted to remind you guys that these two are free for educators. Tinkercad is free for everyone, I think, but both Maya and Tinkercad are free for educators. So those are tools that you can start playing around in your free time, and you can use it in your classes. And although it takes a lot of time to master these programs, yeah, I think it doesn't take a lot of time to get a little bit of a hands-on experience with them and learn the basic concepts so you can apply them in your classroom and explain to kids and get their interest. And then later on, kids will have more free time, they can play around and become masters. But I think these two programs are going to be very helpful if you want to get that spark in the kids to start learning other things. And they're free. So
And we all like free stuff, right? Because it's free. Okay, so are you guys gonna say anything else, George, Fernando? All right, so then from there, I'm gonna take it from here on now. So hello everybody. Thanks for dropping by. My name is Randy Anaya, so I'm part of the people here at UTEP Learning Environments. So within Bandit, right now I'm the audio guy. So I'm one of the people in charge of getting the audio parts for what we do within the group. And so let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so I'm gonna do a little presentation here. And then let me get my screen over here so I can see everybody. All right, so we're going to talk about sound design. So sound design is thinking both on music, sound effects, but ultimately it's how the audio that you get in a video game and movies and everything that is audio related can enhance the experience of such thing that you are experiencing. So obviously in this case it's video games, but that being said, audio is important. And so part of it is, so why non-gamers don't understand that game soundtracks are a thing. I didn't get it, and come to the office and suddenly I hear Mario and Tetris and all these things. I'm like, what? Who's playing games? Oh no, it's just a playlist. Oh, okay. Because from late 70s, early 80s, 8-bit music, music and sounds have evolved just as technology has in video games and movies. And so now you have people that actually build soundtracks and compose music for video games. And so again, a lot of the things that we are talking about today is how you can take something that students might like, and then you can use it to find different career paths and ways in which you can mix that around with the current technology that's available. And obviously, if you mix that with pedagogy and the ways in which the school system can try to implement this, then everybody can win with these types of situations. And so start off with the presentation. Go ahead and click over here. Okay, let's see. So rule number 1, cameras on. If I don't see cameras, I'm gonna pick on you, which is rule number 2. People participate, and I was the kid that sat on the back of the class, and I always had to step to the front of the thing and the board and write things. And then I learned, hey, if I sit at the front, they don't ask me stuff. So usually when I have my meetings, I want to see people, I want to see smiles, laughs, or angry looks. If you have your trainers in the background, it's fine. If you have your socks, it's fine. Let's just have that interaction. And so if you're driving, just don't zoom and drive, and let's take it from here. So the next part is rule number 3. It's not necessarily a rule per se, but whenever we're going to have audio, then I will give you a prompt. So you might see like headphone time or something like that. Okay, so let's start with a quick video.
Sound. Sound is easy to take for granted in a game, but it plays a critical role in every game experience. I mean, even a simple sound can set the entire mood of a scene. Take, for instance, the sound of a door opening. The mood can be changed so it sounds happy, or sad, or terrifying. Okay. Okay, stop. Okay, start the episode, please.
Okay, so sound is important because it enhances whatever you're experiencing through a video game, right? And so, just for future reference, some of the magic words of the day that you have to consider. So we're going to talk about sound design, about Foley, Creative Commons, public domain, royalty free, freeware, and Parangarikuturimikwaro for those that are doing your Spanish classes. Well, you don't have to really look up Parangarikuturimikwaro, but all the other words that are there, if you look those up on the internet, on YouTube, you will find a lot of information and free resources there. So think of if you did sound design, you will have a lot of channels that talk about how they design specific sounds for specific games. Same thing with Foley. One thing though, like I put up in there, is that you're going to have a lot of resources, but not all of it is PG. And what I'm trying to say by that is a lot of those things are gameplay. And as you've probably already experienced, sometimes you get very excited in gameplay. So on some of those videos, I've seen a lot of those videos, there might be an occasional shouting and or swearing. So just make sure that when you're looking at some of those videos, if kids are present, just be aware of it. Okay, so the next part. So going back to sound design in games. So you usually have music and sound effects, obviously already speaking about visuals and video. Then that equals into sensory fun. So why are music and sound effects important in video games? Well, the first part is that they are playing cues, right? So as a cue, they reinforce what is happening around you. Every time that you're playing a game, you're not playing completely muted. Something is usually happening there. So you might have music, or you just might have the sound effects of your character walking, moving, or something that's going on around you. So you have that cue of your surroundings. At the same time, audio will also give you feedback in the sense that actions, situations that you do, they might say that if you're doing something correctly or if you're doing something wrong, usually audio lets you know. At the same time, audio drives emotion. And so it could be something that's happy, it could be something that's creepy, you could reach the boss level, different things. And the game is set up that as you're playing along, these playing cues, the feedback, and that emotion will help you to navigate whatever is going on within the game.
Sound design is critical to game development. It reinforces the gameplay experience and the core thematic of a game in a way that's truly satisfying and deeply emotional. Plus, there's like explosions and stuff. Let's break down the goal of sound design into 3 parts: providing gameplay cues, giving the player feedback, driving the core emotion of a game. Sound design provides cues that clarify and reinforce what's happening to or around you. Things like whether your ability is ready yet, if there's damage being dealt to you, you've been spotted by an enemy, or if you've constructed enough pylons. Shut up, I know! Sound is a powerful way to give a player feedback on the decisions they're making in a game, be they good or bad. Sound design is a core emotional driver that works to pull you into the experience, like the bleak atmosphere created by the sounds in Papers, Please. Or the terrifying sound of someone following you in Outlast 2. Or the immersive, nuanced sound of a car's engine in Project Cars 2.
All right, so let's take it up to questions to everybody. Anybody have any questions, comments before I use the finger of destiny and choose somebody within the audience?
Well, I mean, I for one,
Okay.
I love playing video games with sound on. And if I have to be quiet, I'll just put on my headphones and listen to
Yep.
it. Like, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
just, I guess I'm kind of weird like that. Even if I play some of my mobile games, like I just like the sound.
Because again, sometimes the sound is a driving force in the way in which you react, right? And so sometimes it's just not playing, but the sounds that you get when you blow something up, when you win something, it gives you that sensation, right? Alrighty, so let's see. Ms. Rubalcaba, Bianca. So tell us about some of the games that you've played, or tell us some of the sounds that you think are characteristic of games.
Did you call on me?
Yes. Ándale. Yeah, tell us
Wait, so
about.
what kind of games?
Yeah, so tell us about some of those sounds that you've experienced in video games that you think cool.
Well, the game that I mostly play is like Mario Bros. Or Super Mario Bros. I like the sounds that they make, like when you hit on the little boxes.
Okay.
When you throw like the fire stuff, like
Uh-huh.
to kill the little animals, I think that's cool too. Sorry
Okay.
if my internet is unstable. A lot of connections at my house, so you can't hear me. But yeah, like that's the game that I've really played the most. That's my favorite. And yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so let's see, Mr. Munden. I'm going to put you on the spot now. So let's say that you're playing a video game that's in space, and you're about to blow up the enemy starship. What would be an interesting sound effect for that?
Like I guess maybe like kind of like the opposite of Star Wars, since you have like the entire explosion in Star Wars. Maybe something like kind of like a vacuum, like you blow it up and it's just you just hear like that. Maybe
Okay,
would be interesting.
awesome. Something like a vacuum, right? Okay, so let's see, Ms. Melissa Dominguez. Let's have you improvise a vacuum sound of a blowing up starship.
It'd be like, oh, something
There
like
you go.
that.
Perfect. Awesome. Okay, so then let's move on to the next part. So again, you're gonna see a little bit of gameplay. So usually you have that instant feedback, right? So you're playing, you have music, you have motions, and then you're getting all those prompts of what's going on. At the same time, you might see, when you messed up, right? You're like, oh, you're dead. And so you have to start all over again, right? And usually when you have very good games, you get all those sounds at the same time, but usually they're very nuanced. So let me show you another example of that. You also know that boss levels, right? And yet you already know, because everybody has played that game, you know what's just about to happen, right? So usually you have music, we all react to those things, right? And so that's why it's important. Those games drive that emotion that you know what's going to happen. You see somebody like, oh, you're going to get the thing, right? And same thing happens when you're playing into a game. You're getting all those prompts, and so I'm going to show you a video when you get into the boss level, and you see these very nuanced. You have sounds of somebody moving, things that happen. As soon as you enter boss level, a little thing happens, right? And that's giving you that prompt that it's time to fight. So with gameplay, it's really interesting. As you talked previously yesterday with George, there's a lot of things going on at the same time. So obviously you have the music, you have the sound effects, you have those prompts that give you that sensation of something's going to happen. But at the same time, you're playing with the visuals, and that's when you talked about yesterday with level design, in which the way in which you design that specific level, it also puts you into a mindset. So, for instance, right now you're fighting this huge, like evil zombie monkey, and so the designers thought, okay, well, for this specific battle, we're gonna do like a spectator type of angle. So you can see the player battling against the boss. You can move around and the camera changes angles. But if you notice, it's giving you like a wider shot so you can see what's going on. In other situations, maybe you're trapped inside a cave, so then you have very little visibility and there's not much where to go to. And so the audio can also prompt and give you that sensation that there's uncertainty, that there's something happening. In this case, it's giving you that idea that you're already in the fight. You have to move around in order to dodge the boss and whatever's going on in there. And so within that, music and sound effects usually give you those three things. On one part, you have the context, right? So the context is thinking when you're designing a game, when you're designing the sound effects, and when you're maybe composing the music. The context is that those series of sounds and music will put you in the right universe. And what do I mean by universe? So again, think of Star Wars, think of movies and other games. You might be in a different universe, you might be in a different era, but still those sounds, whatever you hear, will give you that reference that you're in that specific moment. And from when you leave from one moment to the other, then the sound also will be a little bit different because it's going to give you that separation of places. At the same time, you relate to those things through your shared experiences. And that's important in the sense of thinking in the way in which you incorporate, let's say, history, when you incorporate art, when you incorporate music into like game development, when you think of history, all those things are through the shared experiences in which you as a person have lived through different things, and then you compare those to whatever you're being, whatever is being received through the game, through a movie, through a class. And so think of it, obviously you relate to the things that you know. And so a lot of the things that you can do when you explore a new universe within a game, within a movie, within something that has never been done before, is that sound, music, the feelings that you get will be a reflection of the shared experience that you've had as an individual, as you with your family, as you have as a kid. And so sometimes you might play a game and you like it because it might give you the sense of you remember when you were a little kid playing, right? But maybe for a child, if it's something new, then they're learning something new and they might be learning about history or music through playing that game. And so at that same time, that context will give you that information about the environment and the situation in which you're going through. And so in that regard, it'll give you the idea that maybe you're in a forest, so you hear the sounds of rain, of birds. Maybe it'll give you a sensation that everything is, there's a lot of tranquility. Or maybe you're in the middle of a war zone, so then there's a lot of different sounds that will give you that context of what's going on. And obviously, part of it is when you have the correct sound at the right action. So if just like right now, if you see that I grab my bottle, I do this, you're gonna hear it when I open the little button, right? And so all of those things by default sync because our brain can process that information at that moment. And usually when you see that something happens and the sound is off, you're like, whoa, what's going on? And you've seen that usually when we're in Zoom, when the internet kind of lags and you see that I'm stuck, but you hear me, or maybe you just hear me talking, but there's no audio, automatically your brain says, hey, whoa, something's going on. And so you use those sounds to generate those types of feelings and pay attention to different things. And again, the going into the feelings part, the music and the sounds will, in one way, you can think of, for instance, with the player arc, the character arc. George talked about the hero journey, which you might have already heard about that. Usually, if you think, for instance, with classical music, when you hear a symphonic piece, usually you would have a specific instrument would be one of the characters. Think of, for instance, with Star Wars. Let me do a pop quiz. So, Mr. Shacht, Daniel Shacht, Shocked. So let's do a super quick one. I need you to improvise. What would sound when you hear, for instance, Darth Vader coming in?
The Imperial March.
Right? Dun, 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 right? So whenever you hear the Imperial March, you know, oh, it's the bad guys, or we're on the bad side of town, right? And so again, you get into those parts whenever you see the bad guy, they play the bad guy music, or when you reach the boss level, they play the boss level music. So it tells you, hey, it's something's gonna happen, right? And obviously, those sounds will predispose the player to get into that specific mindset. So a lot of it is you're leading the player to feel different things, to look at different things, and to experience different things through those different sounds. At the same time, that's giving you prompts. So, like we said, right? If it's a bad guy, they'll play they will cue the bad guy music. Let's say that you're going through a map and you've reached to the second part of that map. You usually will get a prompt, right? So let's do another improvise. So Miss Sirena Ortega. So let's say that you're going from level 1 to level 2. Give me a sound of reaching a new level. Uh-oh. Sirena.
I'm sorry. I thought it was I didn't put unmute, but I guess something happy, something cheery, like the Mario ones where it's kind of like a clicking sound.
Okay, so improvise the sound.
I don't know.
Well, think of whatever. So the idea here is, because let's say that if you do something like this with your students, you're going to have to do the same thing, right? You're going to be, okay, guys, let's go to level 2. What's the sound for level 2?
Bing.
There you go. Bing. So the bing will say, okay, we're on level 2, and suddenly the game might change, right? And again, these things can also give you ranges. So whenever you're playing a game, you program specific sounds to specific parts of your level and level design to react to the player reaching certain milestones or certain places. So usually when you get from level 1 to level 2, you will get a bing, you will get a sound that says, hey, you've done it. And sometimes there's also a visual. Level 2, bus, right? And so you're getting those prompts and also telling you, hey, keep moving because you're getting somewhere, right? And basically it's telling you that something is happening. So for instance, context, right? Everything is a context, and that's why you have to have that into consideration. So that's a GIF, that's a walking alligator, and that sounds kind of like funny music, right? It's like, oh, here's the alligator going back to the golf range, trying to chase the ducks. People look at him. There's an alligator called Chubbs in Florida that lives in the golf field. And so you get that prompt that it's an alligator, right? But then let's make him into a scary alligator. Exact same GIF, but now it's like a menace. And it's going there. It's like the bad guy at the end of the movie. He's messed up. He has a missing leg. But he's going for you, right? Or let's say that it's a sad alligator because he was swimming and somebody chopped off his hand. And he's trying to survive, but he's misunderstood because people think he's a monster. and yet he's just there trying to enjoy the sun and get a tan, right? But people don't know. People don't get it. People fear him and hate him because they don't know him. But he just wants to lay in the grass, right? So context matters, and when you design the game, that drives the emotion, and it makes you think specific ideas and get specific feelings based on what you're trying to design to get out of the game. And in that, for instance, in this example, you can see ways in which you can map sounds once you're in Unity, for instance, or when you think, okay, well, when I reach this certain part, this sound triggers, or when I reach this character and I hit them within this certain a space, something happens. And so that's part of not just thinking of creating a sound, but also synchronizing it correctly so you get the appropriate prompt. Okay, so from here, learning how to do sound research. So part of what I want to talk about is obviously, as you've seen, each one of these specific things can be its own specialty, right? So obviously, if you wanted to do sound, that could be like a whole year workshop. There is sound engineering if you wanted to major in something like that, right? So a lot of this, it's more of, I want to get those creative juices flowing. So if you wanted to do something like this, then try to find the tools or get ideas on how you can do this and that, take it back to your kids. So in this case, think of when you want to do sound research. The first part is you have to think of time in the sense that you can think of a specific era, age, time, and history. And so this is again where you can put these different techniques, different things from classes into the game, right? So let's say that you wanted to do a game about, I don't know, medieval Europe. So then you can talk about up to a certain time frame, and then within that time frame, there's usually very specific context that you can bring from that time. And so sometimes you might be limited in the sense that if you're talking about something, let's say prehistoric times, then there wasn't music, right? And so that puts you in the mindset of, okay, so if it's cavemen, they probably just had percussion. So we're going to use something that's, okay, hitting sticks, hitting drums, the sounds of rocks, things of that sort, hands, people talking, grunting, doing that thing because there weren't any instruments around. Let's do it the other way. Let's say that it's a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, right? So let's say if you're in space, then your sounds are going to be very different. They might be generated by computers, by the sounds of the technology of that time frame. And so part of it is when you do research again, this is where you can prompt your students from, sometimes they might not like history, for instance, but if you go specifically on, let's do history of this period. Let's talk about the music. Let's talk about the instrument. Let's talk about how the culture was back then, the stuff that they ate, the way that people dressed. And those are ways in which you can kind of entice people to do research for one thing and learn how to do it for something else. And so you can find also within specific timeframes, very specific music styles, musical techniques, compositions, things that you can use as inspiration and that you can maybe take out of that context and reapply for your game. Same thing with culture. Very many cultures have very specific instruments. So if you were to think, for instance, let's see on the group's musical knowledge. So Mr. Yepes, Mr. Justin. So tell me, there is a wind instrument very specific to Australia. Do you know the name of that instrument, for instance?
I have no idea.
I'm going to give you a hint. It's like a long stick. Anybody else?
It's got a really weird name. It's
like a didgeridoo.
didgeridoo.
Yeah.
Didgeridoo.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, for instance, if you wanted to talk about the Aborigines from Australia, you can use a didgeridoo as an instrument that evokes that culture, right? Or if you want to talk about something that's more primal, more that involves something of that sort, you can use those types of instruments, right? And so by exploring culture, you can also get all these prompts of how certain cultures were. You can talk about their technology and their advancement based on a specific time. Um, you can think of rhythms, especially with and culture. They're usually not just music. They talk about the sacred, about festivities, about war, about long distance communication. So, for instance, in Africa, you have the talking drums, and people would play the drums from one side of the mountain to the other, and they would talk that way, and that was their communication, right? And so um, same thing, there's a lot of, let's say, frequencies and sounds that are based on our experience again. And so music is a great way to travel the world and travel through time. So for instance, I mean, we've all seen this, right? When let me do another, let's make up a sound, a question. So let's ask Ms. Hernandez Legaspi. Okay, so Ms. Liza, if I told you, how would an Indian, like an American Indian, sound based off of your experience or your memories from movies or TV shows?
Like they will be like gelling or something like that, like making
As
those.
an example.
Oh my goodness.
Do it.
Like yeah, something like that. I don't know.
Okay, so Ms. Miranda Salaya, help her out.
What sound are we making?
Indians.
A what?
Indians.
Indians?
Yes.
Like how they do their call, like oh.
There you go. So, for instance, we know that because of movies and games and things of that sort,
Or
that
like also like it's like an instrument. It's like pipes together. Like it sounds like I don't know what I can relate it to, but it's like little pipes together. I don't know if y'all know what I'm talking about.
yeah,
It's kind of like a harmonica sound.
like the panpipe, right? Yeah. For instance, with the Indian sounds, we've known that sound from movies, from TV shows, from old like television, right? But for instance, that's also, the sounds are very similar. For instance, if you've seen any recent shows, there's a show on Amazon called No Man's Land that talks about these women warriors from the Middle East from a few years ago. It's a real story, and you would see that when a troop of women would come back to the base, all the women would make a sound that was almost like the Indians. They'd be like, "Ah!" You're like, but that's Indians, and your mind goes like, wait. But again, when you talk about different cultures, every culture has their own ways of speaking, of celebrating, of doing different things that prompt a response, right? And so those are also very interesting ways of getting to know different people and different cultures. And again, instruments themselves, by themselves or in a group, evoke different feelings. So we've all known what when you have strings like violins, they could be happy, it could be sad. Same thing with wind, percussions. All of those instruments, when played by themselves or in orchestration, they evoke different feelings. And so part of the research is going into finding what culture or what time frame play certain instruments so that you can apply those to the game. There was I was talking to Fernando last week, and he was talking about this actor that, or maybe you can tell us more about it, Fernando, about Jamie Foxx as an actor, and they were playing in this movie, and they started to improvise about a scene, and they ended up talking about a song, right?
Yeah, I think he was for the movie for the movie Ray, and he was in the bus and he was with another actor, and they both started to improvise a small like segment, like 15 seconds or something, and the actor said something about a song, and the scene, right, and at the end, Jamie looks at the director and says, "This take doesn't work." And the actor was like, "Well, why? It was a very like a really good take." And he was like, "Because the song that you mentioned came out. I don't remember the dates exactly. It was like the song you mentioned came out in 1965, and this scene is being like in 1962. So we are recreating this scene 3 years before that song. So it's impossible for you to make a reference to that song." And the actor was like, you know.
Yeah, and I mean it's little nuances like those, right? Some people notice those things, some people don't. But again, when thinking about research, right? When you want to do research, you want to have the correct information, and so this is when those things come into play. So obviously, if you're trying to evoke sensations, you can use any instrument that you like. But then sometimes some people might be very specific that they want to do period things of that time, and so uh, they do the research to use the proper instruments, the proper techniques, the proper coloring, or whatnot. And so it goes back to the way in which how thorough you want to be, but also let's say that you wanted to sound something like this, then those could be some of of the questions that you could ask your students, as in, does this apply directly with that specific time, or would this be more of just to evoke a sensation? And so those are things that you can consider for future development of something like this. Okay, so up to now, any questions, guys? Alrighty, so then let's move on. So from here, let's go to the next part. For instance, this is a historic when people would use drums for war. So, for instance, if you were around the 1700s and you were a soldier, those beats would have been very important because they were telling you, hey, you're about to go to war, prepare your musket, do a formation of four, and follow the cues so the troops can move along. Because if you're in a battlefield with 10,000 other men, obviously nobody had a PA system there to shout stuff. So the only way in which you could actually communicate via long distances is by playing the drums. But then you had to make very specific patterns, so those patterns could travel through the distance and with all of the other sounds that are going on at the same time, and still be able to get your troops ready to fight. So from a, a utilitarian way of using sound, right? Okay, this means get the troops ready. This means let's march. This means let's get your weapons ready. If you're producing a video game, then you can say, okay, well, maybe we can use this beat as a sample for when we actually have to go into the fighting scene with the boss. We can use those beats as the base so we can lay more music on top of that. And suddenly you have a soundtrack, right? And again, that's part of doing research. As a user, maybe you're like, oh yeah, I like that song because it gives you that sense of action, right? But usually when you see the making of, you might have somebody, yeah, so we found that this is the rhythm that they use when troops would go to war, so we use that for the game because this is the most important part of the game before you reach the final boss. And so those are the things that when you do the research and you apply it properly, you're not only learning about history, you're not only learning about music, but then you can use it in something new. And with students, it's always interesting to engage in different ways, right? So you learn something from history and life, and then you apply it in something new. And that's part of creativity. When you have two things that already exist that don't talk to each other, and suddenly you make it work. This is another example, not necessarily of music, but when you're doing research. So these are renders from the game Assassin's Creed. And so this is important because if you probably already know that a few years ago, Notre Dame was set on fire, right? So there was this huge problem and a lot of it burned down. So when the guys were developing the video game, they actually 3D scanned the whole church. And so what you're seeing in the video is renders of what they did for the game versus reality. So after Notre Dame was on fire, these guys talked back to them saying, hey, we have some of these files. So when you want to rebuild, if there are some of the plans, because remember, this was built over centuries, right? So a lot of the original plans and schematics may not have there, but these guys have the actual 3D renders. And so I think it's important, like I was saying previously with Internet of Things and how gaming can be used in different ways. It's sometimes it's not just about building a video game. You are building a 3D model of an actual building, right? So maybe you can replicate it. Maybe you can save it for posterity. Maybe you can use this as a diagram for something else. But when you get the skill of modeling in 3D, when you have the skill of building sounds or interacting with people, that skill can be used in different ways for different purposes. And so this is, I think, where you can also find the value of using technology, of using 3D rendering, and ultimately of building video games. Maybe not specifically for an industry if that's not what you want to look for, but as a means to a different end. And so going back, thinking of if you want to work with audio, if you want to do something of that regard, there's different ways in which you can get resources. So part of it is how you can get stuff from the web versus recording stuff. Both of them are awesome. Both of them are cool. Both of them involve a lot of work. And so it depends on your situation as a teacher, on your group, on the age of your class, on the resources that your school may or may not have, but also the resources that you might be able to get through grants and different things that are usually offered to schools, right? And so in that sense, make sure that anytime that you're building a game, anytime that you're doing something creative, you probably already do this, but
Goodness, finally you're here. I need your help.
you have to make sure that you have both on your resources, your graphics, your apps, your music, your templates, anything that you build. If you don't build it from scratch and you don't have a license for it, make sure that you find something that could be under Creative Commons. So usually Creative Commons is material that somebody built and that they are releasing it to the media for free because they just want to contribute with the community, or maybe that's their attempt of showing their creative work to get a job. And so a lot of those things, when it's Creative Commons, you can use it and you won't get into any legal problems. At the same time, there's a lot of stuff that is called public domain. Think, for instance, Mozart's symphonies. He wrote those many centuries ago, and so those are not considered public domain. So now you can get the music, you can get the sheets, and you can play that music, and nobody's gonna sue you. If you play that on YouTube, it's gonna play. They won't stop your video. Versus if you play something from, let's say, Guns N' Roses, which are very iffy on YouTube. If you put that song, it won't even upload because the YouTube algorithm will block you, saying that you're doing copyright infringement. And so whenever you want to do something like that, make sure that you have Creative Commons or royalty-free. When it's royalty-free, same thing, you're not paying royalties, which is the way that artists make money when they play that music. So every time that you listen to a radio, Spotify, Pandora, the artists get a little bit of royalty money based off of the number of plays. And so make sure that your resources and your media is in that way. Same thing, public domain. Usually those are very old and obscure works, obscure sources, because they tend to be of composers or artists from a long time ago that are dead, and that their works are not being taken care of by anybody, or that it's so old that it's already lost all the royalties that it can generate. An example, for instance, Jimi Hendrix. You can't play a lot of his music because the Hendrix family still reserves the rights of distributing that music. And so maybe in 200 years from now, after a certain specific time, then those resources can be available for everybody. Same thing when you have web services or apps, those could be a good resource for you to get those things. And so you might have to pay a monthly or a yearly subscription for resources, but you can get them. Again, there's also a lot of free apps that can help you get started in doing some of these things. And mobile devices are a great way to start that. If you guys have iPads, for instance, you already have like a very simple but powerful media editing tool. So let's say that you want to get into sound design and audio production, and I have the why and the why not. The why in the sense of why you want to pay for stuff. Okay, so why should you pay, or why would you want to pay? Number one, because it's easy. And then it's quote unquote affordable. Usually you don't have to pay for that. Usually it's the school, the district, the school system, and so they might get a larger license and everybody gets to use it. And so in that sense, some of these services are more affordable in the sense that since they already have a subscription, you can download as many things as you can use because you already subscribe to that. And through that, you have constant updates. So then there's always people that are uploading new content. So there's always new graphics, new pictures, new resources for you to work with. At the same time, you can use that if you lack the space, the knowledge, or the time, for instance, to make 3D models. If you don't have the time to learn how to produce music, if you don't have the space to have a recording studio, there's a lot of constraints. And so sometimes if you get these services, those things might be simplified so you can get to do things and build the game versus have to build everything from scratch when you might not be able to. At the same time, maybe your students might not be able to produce that. If you have kindergartners, how can you build a 3D model with a kindergartner, right, when they can't even type their name? And so a lot of those things are also in a way age restrictive, but based on your experience and your teaching styles and what your curriculum has, maybe you can do something more simple in which students can participate by creating the audio sounds or things of that sort versus having to model. Or maybe you already have the models and you just help them drag and drop or do different things that students can feel engaged, but they don't necessarily have to produce. And again, because if you have these resources, then you can focus on other curriculum-related tasks. So maybe instead of having them model something from scratch, then your task is, okay, I need you to research because that will help you with your reading, and you're going to have to write a story. And so you can use those tasks for the game, but not necessarily having to do part of the game because, again, because of your class size or age, it might not be possible. The other part, going on the funny side, is so that teacher won't have to sing because there's always a teacher that brings out the karaoke machine, right? So maybe you're like, okay, we don't want them singing anymore. We're done for it. So that way, then we use that as the excuse, right? And then you're going to have karaoke in the teacher's lounge. And the other part is try it before you buy it. So some of those steps will give you like a 30-day trial. Some of those apps, you can use it for free and see if it works. See if your class responds to that. Because the other part that usually administrators don't like is spend all this money on something that nobody uses. And so there are resources that you could use at least for a period of time to see if it works. And if it sticks, then you can start building upon that and improving it, right? If it doesn't work, then you can try a different approach. But ultimately, there's tools in there that you can use for that type of thing. At the same time, so why not? As in, why not do it yourself? Well, obviously, you can get to do more creative activities. And so to engage your students, making stuff with them would be an awesome experience, both for you as an instructor, right? Because you get to learn something new, you get to learn maybe new software, new techniques, and then you get to experience new things with your students. And obviously, you want to make your classes more interesting, more fun, more engaging, but you also want them to learn. And so maybe this is a great way for them to learn something that they haven't learned before. Um, you can find new services, tasks, vocations. So usually, if you might already have somebody that's, you also have, as I am an instructional technologist, you have your instructional technologist in school. So maybe these are new things that they can work on. Maybe this could be the excuse to get more people on the staff. Wink, wink. Maybe this is a way that you might have an old computer lab that isn't being that used that much anymore. Well, maybe you can do an upgrade. Maybe you can add more stuff in there so more people can use it. There's different ways that you can use this as a resource.
And also talk to your librarians. Maybe sometimes they have the resources and they don't know how what to expand them, and then you tell them that you have these ideas, and maybe the librarian can be like, "Oh, I know who to contact," and probably that person is gonna contact the technology. Um, I forgot your title, Randy. Your
Technologists.
But yeah, also talk with your librarians. Maybe they might be interested in doing something like this.
And so sometimes you might have students that like really, really, really want to do this stuff, and maybe you already have a video game club or an AV club or something like that. So maybe this is the chance that you can say, okay, you really want to do this? Here's the stuff. Show us, you know? And you get to showcase that with the work that your students do. Again, a lot of this is multi and interdisciplinary activities because you're going to have people that like to play music and people that like to record the music, and you have people that like to do the research about the music that people need to play. You can have people doing the actual audio. So if you wanted to think about this, audio, it's sound, but if you go farther back, it's frequencies. And if you wanted to really focus on something like that, that's 100% physics. So it's sometimes it's not just playing with the volume. There's a lot of more stuff that goes involved into something like this. And so this could be the pathway to get something like that. Again, there may be, oh, there was a typo there. Various types of funding. So sometimes there's funding via the state or the national level. Sometimes companies have money that they will be donating for people that want to develop something like this. And so a lot of it is maybe you have the need, maybe you have the people, but maybe you lack the resources. So this could be a chance in which you can get that grant, in which you can get that extra state funding for your school or your program that maybe it wasn't there, but now it is because you're showing that there's a need for it, right? And a lot of it, again, it's based on your specific teaching style, your class, your school, your district. There's many layers to this, but at least right now, because it is based off of technology, there are ways that you can do something like this. And then the other part is you get something for audio, and now you can get that teacher to sing and do stuff for you. Okay, so moving on from here, some of the services that I can suggest that you can do, for instance, is called Envato Elements. So this is one of those paid subscriptions. And on these, a lot of these things are more towards like general media, that you can get certain music, certain images, and certain graphics. But again, like I said, maybe you don't have to build something from scratch when you get a resource from the outside, so you can focus on the end results. So Envato is really good for audiovisual things. They do have some 3D stuff, but again, it depends on what you want to do. But that's one of the many resources that you can find talking about doing your research, right? Anchor. Anchor is, let's say, if maybe you're into, you came into this not necessarily for gaming, but let's say for podcasting or for interviews because you wanted to record audio. Maybe the segue of, hey, we need funding to build a game, and now we have microphones, so we can also do podcasting. So you do a 2-for-1, right? Like a little 1-2 punch. If you wanted to do something like that, Anchor is a cloud-based service that you can do podcasting online. And so again, there's many websites, there's apps. These are just very few examples that you can work with. But again, the idea is you have different needs, and so there are things out there, there are resources. It's more of you finding something that fits your specific needs. And then again, Creative Commons, this is the website that gives you that licensing. And so you can look it up online. There's different ways in which you can get or license stuff. And so this will just help you in the legal side of things, because obviously you want to build the game, the district wants to show it, but they don't want to get in trouble, right? And so you have to consider all these things when you're building something that's creative through the means of a school system. Okay, so let me show you something else. So if again, this was if you're wearing headphones. If not, that's fine. Just we're gonna play audio. So let me show you the next video.
It can be hard to describe parts of a sound without knowing the technical words we use. But honestly, a lot of the time we don't necessarily use words.
Okay, see, so you're not the only ones doing weird noises. And when you're thinking of building your sounds and your music, a lot of those things are just layered on top of each other, and suddenly you have an explosion, suddenly you have a spaceship, and it's just people making weird noises, right? So a lot of this is, I know that for some of you, I put you on the spot, but again, if you do something like this, you're going to be on the spot in front of a microphone, right? So a lot of this, again, thinking of the ways in which doing a video game can help you develop different different teaching styles, different skills. Obviously, you have to feel comfortable, right, being in front of a microphone. And you as instructors, in many ways, are already used to being in front of a class and delivering your content. But when you flip it over, you will see the students. Okay, Randy, go to the front of the room and tell us about something. And you see him like fidgeting, like oh. And so again, maybe recording audio, doing the research, building a game can help students and building that on one part discipline, self-esteem, of feeling that it's okay if you make weird noises and you might feel self-conscious, but when you see the end result, it gives you that certainty that you can do things, right? So for instance, we were talking last week with my college students about fears and facing them. And for instance, if you're very afraid of heights, I tell the students, well, you gotta face your fears, right? But if I just grab you and put you on a ledge, you're gonna freak out and you're maybe beat me up because you're terrified, right? And that won't help you face the fear, on the contrary. But let's say that, because we were talking about weird foods, and these students had never tried smoked oysters. So I brought a can of smoked oysters so they can try them for the first time. And I was like, okay, well, you can build upon this. So if you can say, hey, well, I've already tried a smoked oyster and I thought it was going to be weird and it's actually kind of good. Maybe now I can try something that's a little bit harder. And you start building upon these things, right? So you guys know in teaching, and you start early with children. You can help them set these things that will help them in the future. And a lot of it is being in front of a crowd, stage fright, being able to speak correctly, especially a lot of us that have weird accents that maybe are Spanish was our first language, right? Or that comes from another country. All those things may be hindrances for them to learn and engage properly, because they won't feel as comfortable in sharing stuff. And so approaches like these can help. again, this is when you see the actual movie magic, right? And so I think it's one of those things that when and many in creative aspects, a job well done means that you don't notice the people doing it, right? And so, for instance, with sound, if you don't notice that somebody made up those sounds, then it means that you recognize them as the real thing. And so, I mean, I could imagine doing something like this with your students. It would be like a really fun project, right? That you get to do all these weird random sounds and then apply them into something. And again, you have them trying new things. It doesn't matter if something works or it doesn't do. But then when you see the end product, it goes back to you're building that confidence of experimenting with new things. Let me give you another example on how they make those Foley sounds. This is for, if you guys are familiar with the God of War video game, and you will see the next part. Yeah, and so again, it's these things that you don't notice people moving around coins and jeans, right? But when you see the visual that it syncs correctly, it just works. And so those are the things that I think are really interesting and important. So when you want to build something like this with your students, you get to show them those experiences, right? So let's go back to the presentation. So recording Foley and other sounds. I know that sometimes you might think that you need this gigantic space like you saw in the video, but again, it's more of how you can get into the creative side of things to get something done. And so if maybe you don't have a recording studio, maybe you don't have a lot of microphones or mixers or things of that sort, you can still try to use your phone and your tablet because you can record sounds in there. You already have apps built into the phone that you can use that as a recording device. And then let's say that you don't have a studio. Maybe you have a closet. So thinking of if you're still working at home, you can open up your closet door, and because sound travels everywhere, when you have something where sound just hits and it doesn't bounce back, that could be a good place in which you can record audio. So for instance, you can use it in a closet or a space that doesn't have that much echo. Usually with recording sound, ample rooms tend to be your arch enemy because other sounds come in. And so the more that you can find places where sound doesn't bounce back, the better. Same thing if you wanted to edit video, for instance, or edit that audio that you recorded. You can use, if you already have an iPad or an iPhone or an Apple computer, GarageBand and iMovie are already built into your operating system. So you don't need to get any other apps because you can use those to do part of your edits. But again, maybe you don't have Apple devices, or maybe you need something more specific. So again, freeware is free software and other creative things that you can get. For video, there's a lot of software that you can get. Like I said, on the Apple platform, you have GarageBand and iMovie. If you don't have that, then for instance, you can use Windows Movie Maker. That one's kind of like but if you needed something, at least you have a resource, right? And again, I know that you guys use different resources within your district, so maybe you already have a solution that can help you develop that, or maybe you already have some software that you can use that maybe you didn't thought of using before. Or for instance, for video, there's a free software that is called DaVinci Resolve, which is very, very good. That is industry standard. Actually, right now, DaVinci Resolve is being used to edit actual movies. So, like I said, if you look it up as part of the words of the day, that is free software that you can download on your computer, and you can edit video if you needed to. But just like with Unity, when you edit video, it's going to put your computer in overdrive. So obviously, make sure that your computer is powered and you have enough resources for that to actually work correctly. If you wanted to work on audio, I think there are more resources in audio than in video. Audacity is a free software. FL Studio, it used to be called Fruit Loops. Right now they have like a 30-day trial, but Audacity could be perfect for what you do. There's another software called Reaper. It's also free. And you can find there are studio, like industry standard apps that you can purchase, but then they also give out the free software versions of them in which they have less features. So for instance, Studio One is one of those free softwares that you can get. You can just look it up online, Studio One. Same thing with Ableton Live. Ableton is another industry standard software that people use in recording studios. Ableton Live is their free version of it with less resources, but you can still use to edit your audios. Okay, so from there, so let's say that if you wanted to build like a home or a classroom studio, can you build something like that? Yes, you can. Let's say in a closet, you just need a really big closet, and then I will give you an example. That is Fernando's studio. Because if you didn't notice, well, if you don't know, Fernando is into voice acting. Because of time constraints, we didn't get into voice acting, which is a whole other industry. Again, each one of these things has its own specialty. So I asked him earlier today, hey, Fed, send me some pictures of your studio. And so, because we talked about this last year, remember, Fed? We were in lockdown. We were like, hey, we need to do stuff. And he's into those things. And we were like, how can you record? And do it in the closet. Open up the doors, stick your head in there, and just press record, right? And so, Fer, tell us about your experience building your recording studio in your closet.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can see, you have two pictures on the left, which are like super messy, but all of that clothes help a lot in dampening the sound. So I really didn't have to treat the space a lot because the clothes are the ones that help me. So the way it works is when you speak, air comes out of your mouth, right? And that bounces around the space. So if you have an empty space, like a big room without anything, what it's gonna do echo, right? So your microphone is gonna, so your voice goes out, bounces in the walls, comes back, and the microphone is gonna hear it again. So it hears the air coming out of your mouth and then bouncing back. So what the clothes help is that whenever the sound comes out of your mouth, it's gonna kill it redirectly because it's gonna impact the clothes. And then you can see on the other sides, I also put like some foam and some old I forgot the word. But you used to cover
Sheets.
cheats, yeah. So I put that, and all that helps because it kills the sound directly. And then the way I did it is I moved the space around so I would be able to do it either standing up or sitting down, depending on what I wanted to do, because it's not the same how your voice projects when you're laying down in how it projects when you're standing up, because it helps your lungs have more space and your voice can resonate more.
Yeah. Thank you, Fed. So I'm not saying go do that in your closet. Fed has a large closet because he has an apartment. My closet in my house is super tiny, but again, it's more of this is more of the idea of you can find creative ways of doing something like this. So if you don't have a studio, in many ways it doesn't matter. You just create an isolated space where you put your microphone so the sound doesn't bounce around, and so you can build like a little tiny portable studio in the corner of your room if you needed something like that. And so, closing rant, because I'm almost on time. So, my closing rant is do not feel limited, guys. Ultimately, and creativity is trying to make things work and having fun doing so. So, when you have constraints, that's when your creativity flourishes. And so, if you wanted to build music, if you wanted to build sound effects, if you wanted to enhance your videos, the stuff that you work with, don't feel that if you don't have the best stuff, you won't be able to make anything. On the contrary, those constraints are the things that make you think even more about how you can pull it off, right? And so use those constraints to your advantage. Find creative ways in which you can get the things done that you need to. And again, work with what you have. Sometimes you might already have enough resources, but you might not have thought of them as a resource. And so talk to your other teachers that wanted to do something like this, or talk to your technologists. Sometimes they have extra microphones from the auditoriums, or maybe they have extra equipment, or I don't know, maybe the computer lab can also serve as a recording studio or as the rendering station. It all depends, like I said, based on your class, your group, your school, your district. But ultimately, talk to people, because you will always find allies in these activities. Which brings me to the last part. Do your research and find a community. And what do I mean by research? When you want to do something, research as much as you can so you can get all the resources, you have the better idea on what you want to do, and then find a community. And by community, obviously you can see there's a large group of people here. We are here as your instructors for today, but also the internet, right? There are gigantic communities that are passionate about video games, about music, about sound effects. So a lot of it is, if you do your research, find the communities, find the people that do this stuff. You can save a lot of time and effort learning by the wisdom, which are the mistakes of others. And so, for instance, Fernando can tell you, now that he has his closet recording studio, he might say, well, I use Sheets. If you have a San Marcos with a tiger, it's even better, right? Or when you find that community, they can tell you things that they've already gone through, so that way you don't have to repeat those things with your class or with your projects. And so even though you might do something from scratch, you're not starting completely from zero, because there's people that can tell you what pitfalls to avoid. And that way you can get closer to finishing that project with your students.
And going back to what Michelle said before, you can also have your AV club, your theater department, your computer, esports, and all of them can help and plug in. You can have your theater department do the voices, do the sounds. You can have the computer team doing, I don't know, the programming of some of the things. You can have your English students or your poets that like writing, and they can create these stories. So you can have multiple backgrounds working together.
Yeah, thank you, Fed. And that's why projects like these are important, because as we talked about, you have a lot of multi and interdisciplinary skills that come into something like this. And we've seen that now that in industry, uh, you have people with different skill sets working together. And previously, it was usually, if you're going to do this degree, it's only that. If you're going to do this career, it's only this. And now industry wants people that are able to do different things. And so, like you said, you don't have to make all the sounds and all the music and all the programming when A lot of this it's more in the asking and the inviting people to join more than what you need. Like Fernando was saying, maybe you can have the AV team helping with recording the audio, and maybe you don't have professional singers, but you can have the people in theater that can help you doing those things. And so that's when you can get into, okay, well, maybe we can do as a school something together. You can use that as extra credit. You can use this as part of your assignment from your vocational class. A lot of it, like I said, it's more in the asking that maybe you can talk to your principal that you need something to get this done, and so they can help you with resources. And sometimes it might not be equipment, it just might be that you have permission to use somebody from a different class for this project so you can get it done. And so with everything else, if you have good communication with everybody else and you build a community, then you can say, hey, there's this need and we have people that want to do this. Help us with resources in any way that you can find them, right? Okay, so that's it on my end, guys. Do you have any questions?
All right. Well, thank you, Randy, and thank you, Caroline, for presenting today. That concludes day 3. If you guys go really quickly, if you guys go to Milano, day 3 assignment is on there. Today's is going to be importing 3D assets as well as applying audio. See, it matches the day. So you're free to go. If you have any questions about the assignment, anything else, leave it in the comments, and any other like specialized questions, I'll stay a little bit after to answer.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for being here today. And like George was saying, you guys are free to go if you want to stay and maybe connect with other teachers about the ideas that you might have. I think that's also very helpful. That way, you don't have to be doing everything. Like Randy was saying, you can collaborate with others that have resources and can give you ideas to do things easier. So, thank you, everyone. Have an awesome day. Take care.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, guys.